of learning and exercise. Howdy. So for this third major assignment, I wanted to investigate the format of doing a podcast. I thought that it would be apropos to try remote styles of learning and exercises like book reviews or anything like that, and see the pros and cons of having students be able to remotely access content like this and experiment with the comfortableness of a format like this for me. For social studies, I chose the book Reading Like a Historian by Sam Wineburg. Now, Sam lays out this book in a very elegant way where he has 8 chapters after the introduction that each draw from U.S. history. So a lot of these things will be really familiar to the average student and to the average teacher. And every chapter is also assigned with major historical questions, major historical skills to work on, and stuff that will be common to or privy to the Common Core standards, so everyone will know across the United States, along with major examples, people, and important skills that you need to work in and be able to teach students effectively so that they can competently look at things historically. One of the big themes that Wineburg deals with in a couple of his books is the idea that, well, most students just view history as facts, right? What do we need teachers for? I can look up anything in a textbook or on my cell phone or online, right? So why exactly do I need a history professor, history teacher, or whomever to teach me all these things? And it's an important question, but it means that we're not getting through and teaching students skills that are required for this sort of discourse community, and to effectively look at these texts, to look at possible future events affected by the history and present going on now, and to be able to accurately look at things and draw adequate conclusions from them. And that's something that you have to do. Historical thinking is not an easy thing. It's an umbrella term that is one of the facets and probably the mainstays of history and being a good historian. Some of the skills that he goes over throughout these chapters include inquiry, contextualization, sourcing, corroborating sourcing, to all very neatly create a canvas and try and figure out what's going on, or at least draw ideas and try to pull information through different lenses to figure out what's going on. And he demonstrates some of these skills in probably the most immediate and pervasive of these skills include like inquiry into the past. Within one of the chapters, he talks about the Pocahontas story, how we all saw the Disney movie as a kid, right? Everyone sees this cartoon, and everyone sort of thinks that's the historical story. Pocahontas saves John Smith, this Englishman who's come across the channel, or excuse me, across the Atlantic, right? He gets captured by the natives, and this Native American girl comes, saves him, marries him, converts to Christianity. It's very romanticized, but Weinberg asks in this historical inquiry in this chapter, was John Smith ever captured? In his first account of the story, he's not. Why is it that he elevates and changes the story when he's publishing a book in 1624 of his accounts across the pond? Well, why is it that it's different? What determines historical narrative and myth, right? How do we view these things, and how should we view these things? And you could extend that to national myths, right? Is it true in America that the idea and myths that we had as kids, that you could own a house and, the American dream, is that still relevant? Was that ever true, right? These are things that you can ask students and display these skills and be able to get them to get bought into the idea of history, get interested, pique their curiosity and motivate them, because it's important questions that deal with them and piques their curiosity and their level of competency and their agency to want to be able to answer these questions or develop their own arguments about these ideas. He talks about one big example of something like this would be the Montgomery bus boycott, Well, does it matter where or when or how many times Rosa Parks was arrested? She'd been arrested before for not getting up for a white man on a bus. Was that the reason why her getting arrested the second and third time? Was it the reason why the Montgomery boycott was successful? Does it matter she had a prior history with this bus driver? These are important questions to ask when looking at historical events. They don't just exist within a vacuum, right? Another major skill he discusses that is hugely important and can also apply to things today is contextualization. It's a major skill, especially because the world is changing so rapidly, right? And things are going on that are so dramatically different. Just even explaining to children, having to go to a library to look up information, they wouldn't get the context of that. So when he draws a Lincoln quote in his chapter on this, Lincoln in context, and it sounds horrific when you listen to this quote from Lincoln. I have no purpose to introduce political and social equality between the black and white races. There is a physical difference between the two, which in my judgment will probably forever forbid their living upon the footing of a perfect equality. I don't even have to finish that quote because I know within your minds, you've already got that idea of what he says, what he means. And you think, man, was Lincoln a closet racist? Was he a white supremacist? What was the emancipation of slavery? Was that just a front? Was that just to try and win the war? What's going on, right? And the thing that Wineburg dwells on in this chapter is, to the outside layman, that's what it may seem like, right? That Lincoln is just being a racist. But when you delve into it, you see that he made this speech at a senatorial debate, right? When he's running for election as a senator in 1858 in Illinois. And you realize that he's in a crowd of people who don't support him. And he's trying to leverage votes to make change. It changes things a little bit, right? And important exercises like this can help students access different questions and look at things as our world changes. So the professor might say, the historical teacher might say, okay, you read this headline of this new news article. Give me the context of it. Who wrote it? Why? When? Where? What was the purpose? What's the audience of it? Introduce sourcing and stuff like that to it. These are important skills that all sort of mesh together. Anytime in the news that I watch or read or listen to something, I immediately have to check my bias. I immediately have to think, okay, what's the context of this? I have to back up and stop and think, am I initially wrong with my gut reaction on something? The world changes so much, and with the digital age, information comes so quickly that these skills that Wineburg are talking about, that historical thinking skills, are so dramatically important because students can look through the news, look through Twitter, look through the grapevine of all these things that are coming out and be able to vet information, cut through all the jargon and cut through the doublespeak and get to a logical conclusion that matches an accurate worldview. And that's one thing that historians have to work on teaching students. Students should not just be sitting back and being told facts. That's not history. It's just transmission. It's not learning skills. And I think that's a really important distinction that Wineburg is talking about in this book throughout. Image analysis. You know, when most students read primary sources, they go, they read the top, they read it top to bottom, and they don't even think to look. Where was this sourced from? Who wrote it? Why? What's going on around this time? And this is important things that are a huge part of this discourse community. The historian immediately jumps to the bottom, to the annotations, to the citations, right? And that's something that we have to do as well. We have to teach students, and I think an important exercise with this would be, you could grab a newspaper article, you can grab an online essay or blog post and say, well, do you agree with the argument of this, and this, whatever it may be? and get students to practice those skills of, well, this person believes this, they have this bias, they're coming from this place, or they're arguing for this. Why did they write this? When did they write this? Be able to teach students that contextualization skills, because they already know how to do this, right? They're not, they see these aspects in their everyday life, but just getting students to take the extra step when they're reading, I think it's an important thing to teach. Now, some of the pros and cons of, as I'm thinking about, as I'm talking and thinking right now, I guess some of the pros would be, this is always accessible. I like the fact that I can look at this and learn, maybe I'm not developing my speech enough, or I'm being rather vague in what's going on, and I can improve lesson plans and stuff like this. But I think the drawback of something like this, like a podcast, is usually you're not just going to let students just watch this in the classroom. It's going to be remote at home. And so questions aren't necessarily readily accessible, right? I can link resources and stuff like that, but it's not the same as a lecture, honestly. And while I do think this is a good practice and a good start, I could definitely do some better editing and stuff like that and better notes. I think that a podcast is a good way to be able to send information to Canvas or Blackboard and have students be able to access it and casually listen to it and pick up on things and take notes, especially if they're auditory listeners, whereas classrooms have distractions, all sorts of stuff. Being able to access information at any one point and not just the 90 minutes of a classroom, it's a really good pro that I like. I think the big thing I would take back from this book, and that I want everyone to take away from this, is think about when you read a news article, or think about when you heard something. Were you ever wrong? Did you have that gut reaction that maybe you need to think historically, or just use those critical thinking skills that historical thinking teaches you? I remember everyone had an initial shock a few years ago to these students approaching this Native American singing in Washington a few years ago. I think it was 2017, if I remember correctly. And everyone was worried, oh man, they look like they're bullying and ganging up on this guy and intimidating him. And then you zoom back. You look at the context. Oh, this guy just walks up to him, sings, and that's the end of it. There's no violent exchange. There's no words really said. Nothing goes on. And that's what we're not doing as a society, because information comes so fast and it's so quick to just clickbait and send information out. And so hopefully, I think if more people could get access to a book like this or to the ideas like this, and more teachers could help proliferate these skills to students and get better at historically thinking, we could all vet information better in the digital age. Anyways, thanks for this episode.